Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast exploring how architects can build better businesses, embrace emerging technology, and create more sustainable, fulfilling practices. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, architect, angel investor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're running a firm, starting your career, or reimagining what's possible, this podcast challenges you to think differently about the future of architecture. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome back to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. So glad to have you here. This is a bonus episode, and it opens with a program more of you should know. Trimble 0 to 60 is Trimble's accelerator for early-stage startups building in the AECO space, and this year it was named Built World's Accelerator Program of the Year. 12 weeks, equity-free, built on top of tools like SketchUp, with each company developing real integrations and showing them at Trimble Dimensions in Las Vegas this November. Walking us through it is German Aparicio of Trimble Ventures, who some of you will remember from earlier this season. He runs 0 to 60, comes to it as a trained architect, and frames Trimble as a system of record, looking for partners building systems of action and intelligence across connected data, connected design, and the connected field. One of those partners is Formas.AI. I have two of its founders with me, Yiping, a serial entrepreneur on her fourth company, and Carlos Banon, an architect, professor, and the design mind behind the product. They're working to close the distance between a sketch and a buildable model, hours instead of months, without taking the designer's intent out of the room. We get into what early stage really means, why trust is a hard part of adoption, and where all of this leaves the architect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. So glad to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
I want to jump in with Herman to begin with, to just talk about what the 0 to 60 program or the 0 to 60 accelerator is at Trimble. And then we have Yiping and Carlos here from Formas.AI to talk a little bit about why they joined the cohort and what Formas is up to as well. So Herman, did you want to jump in and talk a little bit about Trimble 0 to 60 and what it is?
Yeah, happy to do so. So yeah, for background, right, Trimble 060 is our accelerator program at Trimble. It's our focus on early stage startups. So it's our way of working with startup companies. So for a little bit of background, it was an initiative that started with the consulting team who were working on building an infrastructure projects and working with our strategic customers and implementing both Trimble, non-Trimble tech. And it was during that time we kind of saw a need, right, for developing solutions that would help drive change in the industry, and figured there's got to be a better way. Why don't we work with startups and creating an ecosystem to help drive that change? And so we launched the Accelerator program in 2018. And in 2023, joined the Ventures teams to do this at scale, partnered with SketchUp as one of our business units at Trimble to use SketchUp as a platform, invited 10 companies to come build on top of SketchUp under this kind of challenge initiative. So we have a call for application in the spring. We invite 10 companies to join us at our headquarters in Westminster, Colorado, conceptualize what their integrations will look like, connect them with our design, engineering, and leadership teams, then kind of spend the 12 weeks post-kickoff event following a traditional accelerator model, developing these integrations, and with the end goal of showcasing what they've built at our demo day in Las Vegas at our annual conference called Trimble Dimensions. So that's kind of the background behind that program. Been running it for 3 years. We were selected as Built World's Accelerator Program of the Year this year. So in this third year that we've been running this, not just focused on AECO, also focusing on field systems. So not just software, but hardware in the three kind of categories: connected design, connected data, and connected field and job site. And so today you'll learn from Formas, which for us falls under the connected design space we're super excited about.
And before we jump into Formas, I don't think a lot of our listeners understand the various different stages that startups happen to go through when it comes to just startup, either bootstrapping or raising venture capital. Can you talk to us about what it means to be an early stage startup in applications to the accelerator?
Yeah, absolutely. And the definition is a little blurry, right? So it just depends on who you're talking to. And I think Yiping has some experience here, so you can also jump in and correct me where I'm wrong. But for us, right, we have a ventures arm, Trimble Ventures. It's focused on growth stage, so Series A through D, and we didn't have anything in the early stage area. So, I mean, when you're talking about early stage companies, you could, even before you start raising money, right? Typically a lot of these companies are bootstrapped. They have friends and family dollars. They're building with one or two customers. And the ideal participant in the 060 program already has those kind of two customers that don't necessarily have to have raised or be venture backed, I should say, and looking to connect and scale, right? So yeah, the ideal participant was founded in the last 5 years, under 2 million ARR. And like I said, not venture backed, but have a customer or two that are looking to connect into our ecosystem to scale their solutions. That's kind of the target startup company as part of this program. And then post program, a lot of these companies use this as a launching pad to go ahead and raise. And hopefully when they're ready, right, they succeed, they're already part of our ecosystem. And if strategic investment is something that's interesting for them, we have the ventures arm that can help with that.
Another interesting thing about the 0 to 60 is that it's equity free for the time being. It may or may not change over time. Why did you guys choose to structure it that way?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, it's historically been equity free. I don't know that it's always going to be that way, but that's, from talking to the various startups, like I said, when we launched this under the consulting arm, this is very early back in 2018. We started working with these companies. That the goal wasn't to, take equity in companies and stifle these companies. It was to help them grow and scale, to be part of that ecosystem. We're trying to grow that ourselves. We're trying to learn from these various participants and what we could offer as a large organization. So some startups needed funding, other companies needed access to technology, others needed mentorship, others go to market, right? Access, that was a big component. And so we've been trying to serve these various startups and meet them where they're at and offer these different opportunities for them. And so today it's been an equity-free program, but I think, depending on what we hear from the startup community, maybe consider something in the middle where we start offering safe notes, for example, in the future.
So you just named the finalists out of a competitive field. Can you talk a little bit about how competitive that field is right now, if it's increased over time, and what you were looking for in this cohort?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely been getting a lot of interest. We had hundreds of companies apply this year, and it was very difficult to select the 15. Like I said, we were named Built World's Accelerator Program of the Year, so I think that helped. We've also expanded the program not to just include AECO solutions, but also field system solutions, so software and hardware companies that applied this year. Most of those companies were building agentic solutions. So that was kind of an interesting tell of the time, right, where we're currently at, where startups are focused on, where funding essentially flowing. So I think those were interesting kind of outcomes from the applications that we received. But our focus has always been in the three categories that I previously mentioned. So connected data, connected design, connected field, and job site. So those are the areas that we were looking for, solutions, companies that were solving, customer pain points in those different areas, not just point solutions, but solutions that could be integrated as part of a workflow. So we're not building ourselves. We're not buying companies. We're looking for partners as part of this program to build together as part of that ecosystem. So workflows that service our mutual customers in that way. And so when I talk to startups like Formas, I always say, think of us as like the system of record. We're looking for partners that are developing systems of action and systems of intelligence in this new agentic world.
So can you just help us understand? I mean, you have these three broader categories, the data, design, and job sites. Can you dig a little bit into each? And then let's roll over to Formas with where they land under the three.
Yeah, so historically in our industry, data has been a big component, right? Interoperability with point solutions kind of living in silos. And so connected data category for me is about developing workflows that push data across the project lifecycle. So going from early stage design, from sketches like what Formas focus on, to construction models, right? To even operations and maintenance. So we service kind of the full spectrum at Trimble from early stage design through operations and maintenance. So being able to have data flow right across various project lifecycle, I think is important to us. And so we have solutions and platform offerings across that spectrum and looking for partners to also participate right across that lifecycle. In the connected design space, we have solutions like SketchUp. So that's really focused on the AEC, let's say, as part of the AECO industry. So architecture, engineering, right? Even interior designers these days, where we try to service those various customers. So the connected design space is more on the early side of the life cycle that I mentioned previously. That's part of our industry. And then the connected field and job site, I think, is where Trimble differentiates itself right from our competitors or partners in the industry, where we connect the site hardware solutions. So 3D scanning technologies, reality capture technologies, total stations, robotics, and connecting that to the office. So connected field and job site is a category where we're looking at solutions that connect that field and job site back to the office and the various workflows around those connectivity points.
Herman, where does Formas fall? And I don't know if Formas has had an opportunity to hear this direct from you, but what made you or what made them stand out to you in the application process?
Yeah, they haven't heard this from me, so this is a great opportunity to share what I saw when I met Carlos and Yiping just a few weeks back. Right, was really exciting to see what they were building and solutions focused in the, like I said, connected design space. For me, I don't know that they're always going to stay in connected design, but that's I think where they're starting their solution. To me, I found it very interesting how they were taking, which is a problem that I've been thinking a lot about these days, is that a lot of the challenges that exist in the industry kind of stem from all these abstractions that we do from an idea to construction. So what I mean by that is, as an architect, because I'm a formally trained architect, we have this idea of a building, and then we create these abstractions of that building or of that idea in the form of plans, sections, elevations, and then we try to build from those. But to me, those are all kind of abstractions, right? And that's a lot of the challenges that stem in the industry come from the missing information essentially from these drawings. And so having been spending time at Gary Technologies, right, which is Frank Gary's kind of a baby back in the day, rest in peace. The goal there was always go from idea to model, right? This builds from the model. I think in this agentic world, what attracted me to what Foremost was building is that it was closing that gap a lot sooner. And Carlos Yiping will correct me where I'm wrong and fill in the gaps, but they were closing the gap between idea and building and going from like sketch to model in a short amount of time and leveraging some of these emerging technologies to go from natural language or from sketch, these multimodal capabilities that these agentic platforms offer to be able to generate right that 3D model that hopefully we can build from. So to me, that's what was exciting about what they were building, and hopefully we can work together to shortcut that gap and get to a point where architects are able to focus on their ideas and less about documenting and building these other abstractions that historically we've done over time.
Does that sum it up, Carlos or Yiping?
Yeah, I think Herman did a great job describing Formas, and really nice to hear from him why it was attractive for us to be part of 0 to 60. I honestly, it's a privilege and really what a pleasure to be working with Trimble ecosystem. I mean, we are right at the beginning, but we already feel the benefits and of the partnership.
Did you want to tell us who you are within Formas, each of you?
So I'm Carlos. My background is as an architect and a computational designer. Also a professor. I teach computational design in Singapore, where I'm based. And I've been based here for the last 13 years. We have been building Formas as well, after, being in the industry for decades and seeing how somehow practicing and designing it gets into a point that probably becomes like less attractive to practitioners, to students, because of the technological gap, the use of certain platforms, the use of like certain interfaces and processes make the process of like designing and develop these spaces and creativity gets somehow lost on the way. And I think there's a great chance right now with the opportunities that new technologies, especially AI, bring to really construct that broken link between the intuition, the intention, the idea, and the building or the space.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yiping. I'm co-founder, CEO of Formas. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so Formas is my fourth company. Before Formas, I scaled ventures in McKinsey. I've taken 3 other companies from zero to exit. We built Formas to be an AI native design workspace for AECO and also for interior design and product design. I think in plain terms, we want to be able to help designers use the most natural language and the natural tools, which is their hands, right, or a pen or a pencil, to be able to go from a rough sketch, a reference image, or a floor plan to something beautiful and buildable. Instead of the weeks and the months that Carlos mentioned, we want to be able to help them do in hours and days.
I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what made you originally attracted to the 0 to 60 accelerator. I feel like there's a lot of accelerators out there in the world. Not to say this one may be the only one you go through, but why this one in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are at a stage where there is actually probably more accelerators that are either quite keen or we are also pretty keen to join. The only thing is we all have limited time, right? And we have to really choose the one that gives us the maximum kind of exposure, right? And the benefits of the partnership. We applied to Trimble 0 to 60 because we have a strong belief in what Trimble has been building already in the industry. So it's very well connected within AEC space. And of course, now Herman also mentioned O and field systems. We want to be part of this because we feel like Trimble, what it brings is really that exposure, that distribution, within a very quick 12 weeks, weekly cadence. You can imagine there's just so much that would happen every week, right? Leading up to November's Trimble Dimensions, getting ourselves in front of thousands of real customers that Trimble ecosystem already has. And of course, not to mention also Trimble partners as well. That's really helpful for a young company like us who wants to have like a strong GTM motion, right? So go to market, we see this Trimble as a very strong kind of GTM partner in that distribution. And of course, we already have quite a lot of users, mainly a lot of architects and interior designers and real estate developers. They are already in the Trimble SketchUp ecosystem. So there is demand. So this has been also pretty grounds up type of requests from our users asking, hey, when is Formas going to be natively integrated with Trimble SketchUp? We're not like building something that nobody wants, right? We are building on something that actually have latent demand and people are willing to pay for it.
And Yiping, you have an interesting background. So I always like to ask people that don't necessarily come from the built environment space how they are finding their way within this space.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I do have a degree in real estate. So most people don't know that. So my major was in real estate. And for the longest time, I haven't been practicing except for just buying properties. So it's the first time really that I could really get into real estate. It has been something that is always very interesting because it's a huge industry in architecture, construction. The whole AEC space represents 13% of global GDP, right? And yet it is one of the least digitized on Earth, right? It's probably slightly better than agriculture, but that's kind of it. And my background, I'm mostly a technology entrepreneur. So before Formas, I was, of course, a serial entrepreneur, but I've also been in the venture capital side and also been building for both corporates and my own companies. For me, I think Formas represents a very interesting, deep yet niche industry. AEC is something that is definitely quite niche in the scheme of the general market economy. However, this niche is a deep one. It's a very deep and wide one in itself. So opportunities like this don't come too often, and we find ourselves, tackling very interesting problem sets in AEC right now.
Yeah. So the other follow-up question is there anything that you find extra difficult working within the AEC space because of things like us being so lackluster when it comes to how technology forward we are?
So I feel that AEC in general have been digitizing ever since AutoCAD arrived. I think when machines arrived, when also we have various tooling like Photoshop, etc. arrived, of course, then Trimble. The thing is, the industry I don't feel is lack of technology. It's probably not the kind of technology that are designed naturally for designers to communicate how they're going to solve the problems, right? We see design primarily as a communication problem, or to phrase it in another way, it's a communication opportunity. Those who could communicate this clearer, faster, showing value earlier to the client set are probably the ones who are able to win projects or to continue to build out some of these projects in a faster way, right? So I think probably some of the challenges would be that technologies in the AEC space has been probably legacy tools by now. I think AEC technology tools haven't changed in the last decades. Some are as old as 40 years old, and it looks like there is a need to refresh, right, some of this tooling. And the other one that we are trying to solve is also on trust, right? AEC is also full of invested efforts, learning some of this really difficult to use software that has also kind of created that vested interest to stay in, what has been taught to you in the last decade. And finally you have become so capable of using this tooling that you want to be able to, still want to show that, wow, you are such an expert, right? I think so it's about kind of building that trust that, we can also be very strong, as a tool set alongside some of these other traditional tools, or, certain parts of, for example, early stage design could be refreshed. So I think trust is a big one. And shall I say as well, I'm not an architect, but everyone owns a home, so we all know about building standards, right? There's all this technical code. I see Carlos day in, day out, sometimes also having to go through so much of this authority submissions. And what that means is, definitely about data. Where do you have your source of truth in your data? Right? How do you bring that across from design all the way to the build process? And how do you also, when one thing changes, the other parts can also have its own kind of sync and adjustments. So I think that part is also something to deal with, right? It's still quite a challenge even till today.
Yeah, I would even argue that just because you've seen Carlos struggled with the authorities, you have more insight into kind of what we have to go through to push things through to get things done than the majority of the public, and a greater appreciation, honestly, of what we go through. I want to swing the conversation a little bit back to you, Carlos. You are kind of the architect behind Formas, both literally and maybe figuratively. I don't know how much of the coding you are doing, but you're also a professor. You have your own studio. So is Formas, are you building the tool that you wish you had right now?
Right. I think it's just that's spot on because I think Forma started out of like necessity. I've been practicing for more than 20 years. So and I practice, maybe I would say, I could do like a speculative design. I could do as well very pragmatic design, buildable, like code compliant. So I'm familiarized with, different like stages and ways of practicing design. And the frustration came over the last maybe probably 3-4 years when AI started to really be around our domain. Before, I think, was not that much accessible, and I found that that the current interfaces, the current workflows started to feel already old. It's like, wow, we want to do all these many things now. We can produce so many documents, ideas, right from your imagination to some sort of like quick production, and the interface is not helping. It was like actually broken. It's like many small platforms here and there allowed you to do particular tasks, but was never an integrated workflow that allowed you to stay designing. It was like, okay, I need to go to an app. I need to use that particular app. I get a JPEG and I take the JPEG to something else. So it becomes very broken. So the potential was there. Was not fully unlocked, but was there. So it was like, well, I think we need to build something. In that case, was allowed me to go faster, to produce new things, to surprise clients and people. And I think that was the beginning of what Formas is right now. And so it's basically solving a problem that I think was my problem, but I knew that was the problem of many architects, designers that were dealing with the frustration daily. And I think probably the answer, you asked me maybe about 5 years ago, probably I would not be able to give an answer to that. But I think probably now in this very moment is where somehow certain technologies allowed for that change, for that revolution. Probably the interfaces we're designing now, I mean, they will evolve for sure, but they are very different to the ones that we could build a few years ago. So the potential is now being unlocked. So we're not just designing an app. It's basically we're designing a way of designing. We are probably creating a space to design a different way. And that's what it was not existing yet. And I think that's the exciting part of Formas, that we are creating a space for designers to regain that joy and to regain that space that was somehow taken.
I am wondering, what gave you the entrepreneurial foresight, though? I feel like a lot of designers tend to complain about tools, right, that they have or identify a problem. But if it's outside the scope of the project, rarely do they ever become solution seeking, especially when it comes to new technology development. So what encouraged you to take those next steps?
Well, I think probably Yiping was the one encouraged me to really take that step forward. Definitely, she's inspiration, and her example of like how she builds and how she can productize things is definitely probably the one that got me to really take the step forward to do it. Probably as well, there's a mix of like previous experiences that I've been developing, but I mean probably the way to productize was not that clear. I mean, I was developing some 3D printing systems that were actually quite successful, but the implementation hit like roadblocks. Like there are many like hurdles to really get systems approved, and it will take probably decades to get a 3D printed system in stainless steel to be approved by building authorities. So I think also out of frustration is like you want to get things done now, somehow to be adopted. And I think when you go to the purely physical space, it really has a very slow timeline to get things approved. But I think in the digital space, in the purely digital space where we are with Formas, I think we can make changes really fast. So I think that need of speed of the transformation, I think was also there out of like years of like very slow pace. Architects, we we are used to working at a relatively slow pace. Buildings take years to be built, and the process where you start an idea and you see your building done, maybe it could be a decade in some of the cases. So we're used to that. But I think moving into that speed, and that's why I was creating this kind of series that I call Architecture at 60 frames per second, because I think that energy, that speed that gives you these new interfaces, this new way of doing, is somehow new to us, and I think could be a way to revive that kind of appetite to really design and to get, especially as well, new generations. I mean, we're looking at generations that are being trained right now as architects in the universities, and they can find reasons to become an architect because now you can be more even than before, right? So there's a mix of things, I would say.
So Carlos is actually a little bit of a genius. So his dean calls him the modern Renaissance man, like the Da Vinci of this era. So Carlos has been actually coding since 6 years old, self-taught coder. He designed and built games for a lot of the school students to play, like super educational games like Spanish crossword puzzles, right, across his new computers, right, at that time. And actually, about 2 years ago, he was already tinkering a lot in the early days of Midjourney, Comfy UI, Stable Diffusion. He was orchestrating lots of these layers of design, sitting at home with 2 GPUs running, and then he gets hired by some pretty prestigious universities or firms to go globally to go teach them how to use AI in architecture or AI in design. And most of the time, during the workshop, he's just calling the GPUs at home, right? He's like, because there's no such product. And so it was also a way for Formas, the early days of Formas was really to productize what he has already orchestrated in a very human way for users to avoid doing all of this messy noodles setup, the nodal setup, right? He's a huge proponent, teacher of Comfy UI workflows before he even got famous. But what we saw was after he leaves the workshop, a lot of students go back to nothing. There's no other tools, right? And then they have to go back to learn Comfy UI and stuff like that once again, right? So we felt like there was a huge gap, and we discussed this over like at least a strong good 6 months. And then he was building out the version 1, version 2, version 3. And to the earlier question, he owns like 100% of the code. Just only about 2 months ago, we started building the team. And of course, the team is now co-owning more and more of the code. But Formas, as we know today, is largely built by this genius called Carlos Banon. And yeah, so he has something entrepreneurial, but it's probably more on the techie side, right? Like if he's born out of Silicon Valley, I think it would come so naturally for him that he's going to be a tech entrepreneur, not because he wants to be an entrepreneur, but he's like just, being techie and problem solving.
No, but I think Evelyn had a really good point. I mean, I think building on that is to close maybe this one. It's true that that nurtured as designers, as architects, we are not encouraged to get into that path, into the entrepreneurial path. We are trained to stay away from that. It's like it seems that it's not the right way. It's like you need to go traditional way, build your small business. I think it's like the mentality that is like brought is a bit like that, which I think is changing right now. I think maybe what happens with AI and coding especially is basically making things. It's a huge disruption, but especially, I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, it being said that I was like coding, since I was 6 years old, but when I became an architect, I stopped coding because I'm doing what I need to do as to make buildings, which is not probably coding. It's drawing, 3D modeling, complying with the code, and produce all these many documents to really make it happen, which is boring, but it needs to be done. But I mean, now working with this technology allows you to if I have the knowledge of coding, now I can connect idea to code directly myself without going to explain the idea to a team of 20 people. And that immediacy that I felt coding Formas is I think what we want to bring as well when designing is like, you don't need to have that bottleneck. We don't need to have that, many this artificial process to use that we have been learning over years to really make a building. There's a different way. So we want to facilitate that. And I think that's the opportunity that we can see that is open. And yeah, we want to take the opportunity to really build that path.
Is there a world, Carlos, where you go all in on Formas and you leave practice altogether, or is this going to continue to be developed in parallel for you out of either necessity or desire to be the designer?
I think probably when I started pivoted fully into AI, I think 3 years ago, and I think in one of my lectures I was like, I'm moving from making to imagining, and I was totally cool about that. It's like I've built a lot. I mean, not probably thousands of square meters, but I think enough buildings to feel like I'm happy with what I built. Actually, I could select certain projects, but I think I feel like I know there's a time for everything, and I'm super fine not building at all for a while. I probably I see Formas the way I could be building in a most efficient way, in a way that I can use my skills to build something meaningful for society. In that sense, I think moving into fully coding and designing through coding has been a way for me to keep building in a different space. And I don't really miss anything related to the physical space at the moment. So I think probably at some point I'll be back at designing or doing more like, some sort of like architectural design. But I consider myself that I'm probably more productive in this space right now. Although I still teach my students. So it's very stimulating to see how students, how to reformulate the education of architects in the very early years, and as well how can introduce technologies like Formas in a native way as well to students. So I keep myself, of course, constantly in a stimulated design space. However, I'm most like I switched to this kind of digital space, coding almost full time.
I want to talk a little bit, Yiping and Carlos, about something you said around adoption and trust, and the idea that I always joke that even though we've had Revit, for instance, for quite some time right now, there's still architects that are using Revit like it's CAD because they don't have the time to invest, right, into learning the software. So when you think about kind of the friction that architects have for adopting new software and technology, let alone like a whole new way of designing, how is Formas approaching that?
Well, while I don't come from the industry, I think there are a few kind of there are some disruptions or technology developments that are going to be pervasive, and AI is that very strong force in that sense. So to a huge extent, what OpenAI and now Anthropic has done is democratize coding, right? Now everyone can vibe code. We feel that to a huge extent AI has also that huge influence for us to be able to democratize design. So I think in that democratization, it means that we can leverage the power of AI to go back to something that's more natural. Instead of having to struggle with so many fragmented tools, are there just simpler ways to be able to communicate your design and then spend more time, right? Spend more time with your client, right? Client relationship, in the storytelling, in the mastery of the craft, in delivering your intention, to then use that as a way to earn that trust from designers who either still hold very dear to their existing tooling, but it's really taking them a long time, versus a tool, right? A platform that listens to you, that listens to your human intuition, right? The ease of use. To a huge extent, I think that I have a strong belief that the naturalness, the speed, and the clarity will always win at the end of the day. So even if there are, like folks who are still a little bit skeptical, etc., all it takes is for more people to just tell you that, hey, there is a better way to do this now. And also, there's a better way to do this now, not to take away your human instinct, right? Your judgment, your intent, but there's a better way to amplify what you have in your mind and to be able to kind of express that, right, more easily. Because I'm seeing architects who are still taking weeks to months. And in my world, as a more layman person, I see homeowners like myself struggling with our interior designers, right? Interior designers come to us and they say, okay, we're going to renovate your house for you, but you don't see anything. You don't see any mock-ups of how your house is going to really look like. At best, you're going to get a few Pinterest reference or one or two images that the designers with a little bit more technical skill sets could muscle along with the 3D modeling or some design software, put some stuff on Photoshop and try to articulate that, right? So I think in the end, ease of use, accessibility, right? And that means the democratization of that, we're probably going to win at the end of the day.
One of the things that I really believe that is transform a bit of the way that we use these interfaces is how natural become to a human. I mean, the models are getting really, really advanced. We just experienced for a few days Fable. That level of like quality in the code, in the response was amazing for 3 days. We know it's gonna come. So we know we saw the future. We see how it's gonna become at some point. So yeah, so I think at some point models become accessible to more people, either open weights or frontier models, and I think people will be more capable of doing certain things. I mean, standards are gonna raise the quality of the images now. Almost everybody can do kind of an image that looks convincing. Like, wow, okay, it looks like a building, looks like a space that looks. But of course, after that first look, you start looking into the singularities of that image, of that design. It doesn't work. It doesn't. So all the many things after the first reading, right? But we're raising the bar, and I think basically what we're looking at here, especially in Formas, is at the human component. It's like how much of that architect, of that creator, of that somehow of the people that are going to continue designing our build environment will remain when using tools like this. And for us, it's very important to preserve kind of that creative intent to really somehow get that human behind the design more valuable. When AI makes generation infinite and as well, probably at some point generic, because at some point we'll get to a point in which almost everybody can get, to provide more people with levers to really pull those models and that technology to where they want. So I think that's for us what we see that is happening. I mean, it's true that it's democratizing like the access to coding and to even generate images. Models like Gemini, GPT are great, but if you don't have guardrails, if you don't have a space, it really takes you to a space that is not even meaningful at all. So that's why building that space for people is crucial, I would say, because even you can see I can see that in some students. I mean, you can see that the disconnection to what they produce with AI. Say, well, AI did this. It's like immediately they detach themselves. Like, I've done this drawing, but AI did this. So you can see that they reject kind of what comes from there because the authorship, because the agency is not there. That will be happening even more and more. So I believe that we need to get that, the authorship, the control, something you can really tell that is yours, of course, in collaboration with the technology you're working. At some point, you won't say, okay, I did this with AI, because it will be it will be the same as if you say, I did that with SketchUp, or I did this drawing with AutoCAD. I mean, you don't mention the tool, you don't mention the technology. You're creating yourself something. So I think AI become like commodity. Then we will need to provide the natural space to get that intent intact. So yeah, I see the path And I think we need to build fast. I mean, to really get that space ready.
What is Formas focused on in these next 12 weeks, since you're in the accelerator, to really get to the next step and prepare for Dimensions?
One thing that we were actually very interested from the beginning, but I think this is a kind of a perfect fit. We were working with Trimble and their toolkit and experience. We can build on that to get some sort of like one source of truth when it comes to generation. So it means that the generations that you make with Formas and Trimble together, they will be especially feasible in a way that you still have the intent, this kind of like, sketching to something that, is out of, your idea. But that idea starts to be validated, starts to be really placed in the world with more control than other tools and other spaces allows you to work at the moment. We see a hybrid integration of 3D models, point clouds, AI in a way that becomes that kind of very like hybrid and quite unique integration of technologies. And that for us is extremely exciting. We know that's only a number of weeks to do that, but the good thing is that we are ready because we have been developed a lot of this in the background, and of course, Trimble has resources and already open for us. So for us it's a great match. Of course, development needs to be fast, but we really want to present something in November that can be a huge transformation on how we use AI to generate interior and exterior spaces. And it's not just more beautiful images. I mean, already we deliver quite beautiful images, and we were not that trying to get there. For us, it's more like how can that image even more valuable for the user, something that really start to replace the need of creating a 3D model, or maybe the 3D model you create is completely different. You don't need to make a 3D model that has all the level of detail. Maybe it's just something very simple that takes you a few minutes, but the output is extremely precise.
Each of you have a bigger play, right, with the industry and what you hope to embrace and change over time. So what is that hope and change for Formas?
I think really we are believing in the future of design being more human-led, less or not even about human replaced. That the winners of AI are the ones that really can give people more creative power, not less. Yeah, and then we're also hoping to build really a future that really gives joy back. I think when people do their best work, when they fall in love again with their craft, they would, it becomes natural again. The excitement, the creativity, that power of that freedom flows again, right? So I think that is a huge part of AECO that we believe in, especially on the A side of things, where Carlos speaks about students. Lots of students goes to his classes with beaming the delight in the eyes, right? And architecture somehow has a way of making it tough when someone gets into the industry, right? Be it code or just so many fragmented tools waiting for rendering overnight, stuff like that. And we're just really hoping to bring that joy back, that reduce the fragmentation, make design really fun again.
Herman, I wanted to bring this all back to you. Did you learn anything, first of all, from today about Formas?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just more excited, right, for what we're going to build together for this future. As Carlos and Yiping were talking about what they're building, and what I mentioned before, that a lot of the challenges in our industry kind of exist because of all these abstractions. I think they're definitely closing that gap. And it kind of took me back to grad school, where we would spend time looking at glass blowers, for example, as a craft. And how do you encode that to have a robot automate some of those processes? I feel like that's what Carlos is building for the architecture world, right? Is this craft as a designer and encoding it into a platform that designers can now more naturally express their ideas and intent, and from sketch to building. So I'm super excited about that future.
And then one last question for you as we head towards the end of this hour. If 0 to 60 does exactly what you hope it does in the future, what do you want it to be in 10 years? What is it building for the AECO industry within the next, 10 years is a long horizon for tech. So even maybe 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, the goal has always been to create that ecosystem, right? Ecosystem meaning not just of Trimble solutions, but partners, including the startup community, to be able to drive change in the industry. So yeah, I didn't even mention the different partners that are participating in this year's program. We have Microsoft, AWS, NVIDIA, Esri, Snowflake, all part of the program as our partners along the way. So it's really about creating that ecosystem of solutions that going back to one of the main points that was discussed, the trusted ecosystem, the infrastructure that startups are able to build on. And so I see a world where there are more startups than less, and hopefully driving that change in the industry that I've always imagined. And so, yeah, excited to see more people build on Trimble as a platform.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.